listening to Living with ADHD and CPTSD, available on Apple and wherever you get your podcasts. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Living with ADHD and CPTSD. Today is an ADHD episode and I have a guest on my show today. His name is Ross and he is in Scotland and he has a podcast called ADHD Hive. Are we there yet? And welcome Ross. Thanks for coming on to my podcast.
Hello, not a problem. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah,
so
you're welcome.
Yeah. I'll just jump right in. What? I understand, like, when we're doing these sort of things, it's once I'm started in a conversation, I'm fine. It's starting the conversation that can be an issue.
Absolutely, anyway.
So yeah, I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 29, because for a very petty reason, to be fair. I work in a bank and I wanted to use headphones and my boss didn't, and I asked her if I could and she said, unless you have a medical condition that says that you have to use headphones, you're not getting them. So I went out and got myself a medical condition that everyone had been telling me I had for years, and I used to make the Sheldon Cooper joke of going, my mother had me tested, which she didn't at all.
Right.
But the other reaction I get is when I tell people I was diagnosed at 29, they're like, you were diagnosed as an adult? And I'm, yeah, you can get diagnosed now. I was like, oh no, I'm aware you can get diagnosed as an adult. I just don't know how the fuck they missed you. Because I'm that sort of quite often.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, since I got diagnosed, I started my Twitter account the day I got diagnosed, literally in the car park at the hospital. I started my Twitter account, and I'm now up to 11,000 followers, I think. Or
wow,
I
that's
don't
incredible.
know why.
Great.
I think people hit the button by accident, but yep, that's what's happened. And
nice.
I run a thing on a Friday night, which is the ADHD Hive party, where I started it March 27th, 2020. And I just put a random message on Twitter saying, anybody want to have a chat on this thing called Zoom that everybody's using since the world went to hell? And a woman in California and a guy in Australia were like, sure. We had a chat for 2.5 hours about nothing.
Wow.
And then the woman, Carrie, then said to me, you should do this more often. And I've done it every single Friday since for over 2 years now. And
wow, that's incredible.
The amount of people I've met through that, I love that you call it a show. My wife calls it the Ross Show because she can only hear me talking, and it's like 1,000 miles an hour. But it's people all over the world that have ADHD, ADHD, just having a chat. It's not a support system as such, and it's more just community. But through that, I met a woman, Marie, and together we've created ADHDhive.com, which is a co-working, party, crafting, accountability, ADHD resource for adults, because there's not really a lot of stuff out there for adults.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's just kind of escalated. So from me being lonely on a Friday night, it is now escalated into a non-profit organization. That now a director of with Marie, who's the other director as well.
Oh, well, that's fabulous. See, there's the more resources that are out there and the help, the better. Like, that's great. Like, yeah, I have heard about ADHD Hive on Twitter, like the Twitter handle, the hashtag, because there was a lady who I talked to about a month ago that mentioned it.
Yeah, we have quite a lot of people that come on and do a variety of different things that we have.
Right.
So yeah, it's good, and it's good to just kind of be part of something like that as well.
Excellent. 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 Well, that's fantastic. So you mentioned to me that you wanted to discuss about setting up, looking into a neurodiversity screening program for kids or students that are about 11 to 12 to look to highlight potential support for them in case maybe they have an issue like ADHD or obviously some other ones like even like dyslexia. Um,
Mhm.
why don't you discuss that? Like, let's discuss that and see where we can
Yeah.
go.
So it's kind of I I wasn't diagnosed as a kid because my mother was still under the impression that ADHD was only the bad boys that got it.
Ah,
So
right.
there's nothing wrong with you. You just talk a lot and can't focus and can't sit still and you're super annoying. But there's nothing wrong with you because you don't get in trouble, which I did.
Yeah.
You just had a little bit of a blinkered view on it. But because I
Right.
have like two little girls and I suspect that the likelihood of them having it's high. So I'd rather
Yeah.
there was some sort of support in place because I don't want my little girls to be diagnosed with like the wrong thing that happens quite
Correct.
often, where it's like, oh, you just have anxiety. Like that's the thing, you just have anxiety.
Yeah.
Um,
It's not that
and I
simple.
want them exactly. So having something that you've got to be careful when you're dealing with kids, especially because it sounds bad. It's not really about the kids that you have to be careful. It's the parents that you have to be careful
Right.
because they're the ones who have the opinion if you're pigeonholing their kid, or they can quite often, like my own mother, think they're doing good because they're not wanting to label their kids when in actual fact they're causing issues by doing it.
Yeah.
So it could be like a mandatory seems worse, but you could have it as like because in Scotland our kids will go to high school after primary school, so they're about 11, 12 when they do that. For
Yeah.
me, I was a really good student in primary school, but in high school, you have to do more on your own. Your parents don't sit with you
Yes.
to do homework. Your teachers don't like they're not on you as encouragingly as they are when you're younger. It's very much like here's
Correct.
your work, do your work. That's it.
Right. For sure.
So that's when for me it started to kind of fall away because I could get away with not doing as much because no one was watching me as closely, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like I don't like to think about what would have happened if I'd been diagnosed younger because I'm happy with where my life is now, and I
Uh huh.
very much live by the mantra: if I'm happy where I am, I can't regret anything that got me here.
Right.
So I kind of think like if you were to have this screening process, it wouldn't be to say you have you have this. Your kid is like super ADHD, so you need to get them on some medication so their teachers don't murder them. Like
Yeah.
it's not for that purpose. It would stay in a file for all the teachers, so no teacher would ever say, "Why can't you just sit still?" No
Right.
teacher would ever say, "Why can't you read the board? I've just put it there. Why can't you remember what I just put there?" Like
Yeah.
no teacher's going
I
to say that
see.
because they'll have a little file. They'll be like, "Oh, you've shown aspects of this, so likelihood is that's why you're not able to pay attention as much. That's why you're
Mm.
tapping your legs so much." And it would be more of an open communication about it rather than
Right.
we're going to pigeonhole you so that you must memorize all these answers so that you can do a test that is entirely arbitrary and actually doesn't help you do anything.
Yeah.
Which is my I'm very I've got a massive chip on my shoulder when it comes to education because it's just a massive memory test.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually saw something recently. Sorry,
Okay.
quick tangent. Which
No, go
was a
for it.
quote by Einstein. It was in a kids like play area. It was a quote by Einstein that said,
Hmm.
"Imagination is much more valuable than knowledge." Or words to that
Interesting.
effect. And it kind of got me thinking, because in my eyes, of course it is, because all knowledge is doing is regurgitating someone else's imagination, because
Yeah.
someone else imagined the theory, proved it with a hypothesis, and then it
Uh-huh.
became knowledge. And then you memorized that knowledge and then claim to
Yeah.
have that knowledge.
Yeah. Totally. I get that. Absolutely.
Like it's almost like Jurassic Park, you know, when he says, "Yes, your scientists are standing on the backs of geniuses,
Hmm.
and they're using this information, but they never had to earn it." It's like they've spent so much time wondering whether they could, they didn't think as to whether they should.
Yeah.
Like
I know that quote. Yeah.
that, it kind of ties into that a little bit. But it's if you were to do this, like I
Yeah.
said this to beforehand, if you were to do this, there was a study that showed, I think it was a high number. It was like 30% of prison inmates, and I'm sure it was in the UK, have undiagnosed or diagnosed ADHD. Now,
Yeah.
causation is not correlation. I get that. Just because you have ADHD does not mean you're destined for jail. But you're much higher to do it because, for example, impulse control or emotional regulation. You get in a
Yes.
fight with the wrong guy, you did the wrong risky thing.
Yeah.
You're not like through and through bad, but the amount of things I know I've done that a lot of people wouldn't agree with, but I was
Right.
a teenager and I thought they'd be funny at the time, and really it
Yeah.
was just stupid. And all my friends would be like, why would you do that? And I was like, because I thought it'd be funny. But it could quite
Mm-hmm.
easily escalate and get you something in prison if there's a person involved and that's the wrong person that takes it to that level, if you understand.
Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
and then you've got to say, because the minute I bring this up, the first thing that people say to me is like, yeah, but the health service wouldn't be able to support the massive influx of diagnoses that they would end up having to do at that point. And I understand that,
Right.
but then you could flip it and go, right, but if you were to bring this in at a teenage level, and those teenagers who, in my opinion, and
Mm-hmm.
you are more than welcome to disprove me on this, um, CBT is much easier to understand and to use when you're younger than when you're older. Because when you're older, you're
Right.
like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that because that sounds like bullshit. And it's harder to get out of the routines that would enable you to be able to do that. Like whenever I've gotten to anything, someone's like, why don't you try this? I'm like, that's a really good idea. And I wish
Hmm.
I'd be able to remember it when I need to try it, but I'm not going to.
Absolutely.
And that's what's going to happen. Whereas if you were to bring that in a school environment to teenagers, it would support the fact that they wouldn't need the medication necessarily. They would,
Yeah.
but they'd have the right support. They'd have the right
Absolutely.
methodologies built in that they'd be able to then handle things as they got older, which way down the line would, I expect, reduce the prison population, which reduces the strain on, well, here, the government,
Yeah.
um, and would in turn have the, I think it's like £50,000 a year it costs the house of prisoner.
Yeah. It's quite a bit. Yeah.
And that
Even
would
even
be
here, it's a lot.
yeah. Whereas that would be £50,000. It doesn't cost 50,000 to diagnose someone with
No,
ADHD.
not at all.
Uh, Not even to medicate them. Like
Yeah.
for
Exactly.
like a lifetime would probably cost about that in countries where you're not so blessed as in Scotland, where we get them free. Just like to
Yeah.
bring that up whenever I can. Uh,
No, that's fine. It's important to tell people that honestly, because not everybody has the same structure when it comes to healthcare and medication and with
but
prescriptions.
it's not
Yeah.
a UK thing either. It's purely a Scotland thing. In England, you have to pay for your medication. In Scotland, you don't.
Yeah.
But if you were to think of 30% of the prison population, now granted, some people are still going to commit crime. So
Yeah.
even if you were to take away 10% and say, right, the population of people with undiagnosed ADHD or diagnosed went down from 30% to 20%.
Yeah.
So 10% at £50,000 a person, you then redistribute those funds into the people,
Oh
into
yeah.
the
Social
like,
programs, yeah.
yeah, all of that sort of stuff. And not only that, but think of how many people who have ADHD who aren't aware that they have it, aren't able to keep a job, want to be self-employed because they have a great idea, but they've just not got the energy or the systems or the motivations to actually put it into place
Yeah.
or the support. But since it got taught as a teenager, because it wouldn't necessarily need to be things that you would be explicitly taught. You'd be
Right.
taught acceptance, you'd be taught patience, you'd be
Yeah.
taught not everyone is the same. Instead of, why does he get to touch his leg all the time and I don't? Like, that sort of stuff would be much more accepted.
Yeah, I
And in
agree.
turn, you would, don't get me wrong, I'm not thinking that a world full of people with ADHD is a utopia, because nothing would ever get finished. But it would,
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's funny.
oh, we have all these plumbers, but they seem to have forgot to put that final bit of plumbing in. But like my toilet
Yeah.
speaks French, but it doesn't flush. Um,
Yeah.
like you've got that whole. I just think the potential benefits of it are limitless in comparison to
Oh,
the,
for sure.
we don't have how are teachers meant to handle kids with ADHD. Oh, the
Yeah.
same way you handle all the other kids, but with a little bit more understanding. Like,
Yeah.
I had teachers in school who knew that putting me by myself because I was talking wasn't going to stop me from talking.
Right.
I was just going to expend more energy trying to talk. And now I'm annoyed at you. And now I'm going to make it my personal goal to piss you off.
Wow. Yeah, I can totally see where you're coming from with that. Absolutely. Like now there's you've said quite a bit, so you'll have to forgive me. I'm going to catch up here, but it's really interesting. You were the one thing you did say earlier was about instead of the teacher saying what's wrong with you, why do you do this? Like that it's the negative tone or the negative approach.
Yeah.
And a lot of children at any age, especially like in when they're 5, 6, 7, or even when they are 11 and 12, if they're constantly being asked or told what is wrong with you, why do you do this, you act so unruly, or you never sit still, they it affects them. And because it's repeat, it's no different if your father or your mother was always saying to you, why can't you behave, why can't you be like your sister, or why like you're always like making mistakes, you're always spilling something, that it affects the child's like psyche and his ability to how he feels when he's as he's growing up, because he'll take that negative reinforcement from whoever, and eventually he's going to believe it, or he's going to start to think that they're right, and the long-term effect of that is not good. So if the student has this, like saying, okay, there's this good potential that this child or the student might have a hyperactive diagnosis or ADHD diagnosis possibly, or he has a hard time sitting still because he just he may have ADHD. That teacher now has the ability to have a more positive out, like interaction with that kid, and instead of it being negative and always saying, boy, you're just you can't sit still, you're such a like, or even saying you're a bad kid or you're hopeless, like, which did happen to me one time. They now, instead of seeing it as if it's a it can't get better, or they're always having that opinion forced on them,
Mhm.
they will actually feel, yeah, okay, I realize that I have this issue where I seem to have, I can't sit still, or I talk a lot, or I'm always interrupting my classmates, but at least they're not being scolded for it, or they're not constantly being told, you can't, you never stop talking, why do you do this. It's such a better way of bringing them up. And like the
It would be
parents.
like
Yeah.
even just thinking about the like someone just popped in my head like an accommodation, like a very
Yeah,
very small accommodation, right? How
absolutely.
many times did you get told as a kid to stop swinging on your chair,
Quite a
right?
few. Yeah, I did do that.
Imagine they
So
gave
yeah.
you a spinning like my chair just now has wheels and it spins.
Right.
Now, instead of me leaning back because you can't do that on a chair with wheels, but instead of me doing that, I would have just probably swayed back and forth,
Yeah.
which is much less distracting, much safer, but
Yep.
probably would have allowed me to listen better because it was a small physical action that was allowing me to move
Yeah.
without my teacher disrupting me. But like when you're saying about teachers criticizing in a non-constructive way, really, it would be like I'm not saying that don't ever shout at a kid with ADHD, don't ever tell a kid with ADHD off. Of course, tell them off. Like if they continue to do something, there's a reason that ADHD is in the UK anyway. It's part of the Disability and Equality Act, which
Right.
means that, but it's got a very specific condition tied to it. You cannot
Interesting.
use it as an excuse for why you've committed a crime, for example,
Yeah. Makes
but
sense.
you can't be prejudiced against. So an employer can't treat you differently because you have ADHD, but you can't use it as
As
a
an
weapon
excuse.
almost.
Right.
So you can't be like, oh yeah, I beat up my teacher because I have ADHD. No,
No, that's
you
not going
still
to
know
fly.
what's right and wrong. Yes, you have impulse
Yeah.
control issues, but you still know what's right and wrong. Um, and
Yeah,
by the way,
totally.
this is just like facts that I kind of remember. So my wife calls them Ross facts because I can never tell you the source. So if people have something that's correct to me, please let me know.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, like it's a much more like there's the thing where what was it? A kid with ADHD gets told 20,000 times more, 10,000 times more than a kid without to sit down and shut up.
Uh,
Now, imagine reducing that even by two-thirds.
yeah. That would be so
And
much better for them. Like
yeah,
mentally. Yeah, I can totally see that. Like it makes a lot of sense. Like it's it definitely ties into everything that you've said. Like I can see the benefit of it. I can see the future, like the aspect, like in the future. Like it makes so much sense because it is one of those things that if you look, it takes nothing to find the information online if you search for it, and you type in ADHD symptoms and ADHD, like committing a crime, and ADHD, like the link, like there's that higher risk for speeding, for driving recklessly, for drinking and driving. Like there's all these things that they say because ADHD, like there's that, they have that inability to think before they do something, and it's more prone for that, and so they're more likely to partake in things that could be illegal. And they say that a lot of people, there's people with ADHD on a have a tendency to live shorter lives because they take more risks, right?
yeah.
Now, if, like you said, if there's a system in place, even if it's to help, like I don't want to use the word like weed them out because that sounds like you're alienating or you're separating them, but to get assistance or to help, like, because kids,
To
not
highlight the
every,
support needs. To
yeah,
highlight the support.
exactly, yeah, yeah, because not every parent, or not every, like not all the parents that are out there that have kids are going to be able to recognize the signs because they're not all educated these things. Like not everybody you talk to is going to go, "Oh, I know what ADHD is and I get it and I understand." Like some like my own parents had no idea. They wouldn't have a clue. Like as far as they're concerned, it's just they're hyper. They're a kid. They lack discipline. It has nothing to do with a possibility that there's a disability going on, and they need some assistance or support in order to have a better chance at being good at school or in their life.
And here's the thing, like everyone's seen those parents, the ones who look like they're run down and cannot put a cohesive thought together because they have five kids who are all just like hyper.
Yeah,
And like, can you not control your kids? But what, because of the hereditary side of it, those parents probably have undiagnosed ADHD.
yeah, that they
So
do say that. Yeah,
they have enough of a trouble trying to regulate themselves, never mind trying to control five kids that they also don't know may have ADHD.
yeah,
And their parents probably had it, and their parents' style was very different to how they are.
yeah.
So there was probably much higher likelihood of abuse and things like that to it. But here's the kicker.
Absolutely.
This is my favorite point about my whole thought on this like
Yeah.
proposal. The downside: you
Okay.
incorrectly tell someone that they are showing signs of ADHD. Now,
Right.
as I said at the start, it isn't a diagnosis. It is a support tool to say, maybe you should speak to your doctor. Now, say
Yeah.
that person slips through the neck, speaks to the doctor, and the doctor goes, yeah, you have ADHD, and they don't. Now, again, I said this before, it isn't about the medication, it's about the mechanisms and systems to support someone with ADHD. Do you
Absolutely.
know what happens if you don't have ADHD and you're taught other ways to manage your mind as if you did have ADHD? Nothing bad happens. Literally, nothing bad would
Absolutely.
happen from you knowing the same like mechanism support that someone with ADHD has.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah. 100%.
if you were misdiagnosed, the likelihood is you probably wouldn't be on meds because you wouldn't have shown enough for your doctor to be recommending it. Your doctor would more likely go, why don't we try some of the systems first and see how that works out?
Absolutely. Yeah, I that that brings up a really good point. When I was working towards my diagnosis, I remember my doctor, he didn't just go, "Yeah, sure, okay, let's get going on this," right? Like it wasn't an automatic just 100% on the road to the psychiatrist. It was he asked me a bunch of questions. It was do you suffer from anxiety? Do you have are there any other things going on? Like it was a very detailed, thorough question or bunch of questions so that he could determine if there were other things that maybe he wanted to look at. Like it wasn't just saying, yeah, okay, it's likely you do have ADHD. Here you go. Have some pills. We'll set you up for an appointment in however long, and there you go. It it was it was a thorough way of doing it, but you're absolutely right. It's a good support tool is the right step in the right direction. It's without that there's a higher chance that kid is never going to have that diagnosis or even like a possible without the support system. So yeah, you're absolutely right. He may not necessarily get diagnosed. There could be something else that's going on that he's not aware of, or but
Yeah,
it's a step in the right direction in one way or another.
yeah, that kid could just be stressed about starting high school and
Yeah,
is struggling to focus because of it. And
yeah,
then starts high school, they're fine.
yeah. The other thing too, and this is a very common thing that's actually coming up more now, is a lot of kids have different learning styles.
Yeah.
Not everybody reads a book and understands it. Some people learn by example, doing it themselves, right? Like
Mhm.
it could help them realize that the method that they're being taught is not as it's not working well.
Yeah,
There's all like it's such a wide range of possible outcomes from it.
exactly. I struggle to find it. Granted, it is my like thought. I get that I'm biased towards it,
Yeah.
but I still struggle to find where the downside is. And my brother's a teacher, and I think he's a deputy teacher or maybe a head teacher now. And
Mm.
his concern was, but what about the teachers? They're going to have to deal with all these kids with ADHD. It's like, well, guess what? They already are.
Yeah.
They just don't know it. And instead
Yeah.
of their day being more open, instead they're making these kids doubt themselves, become anxious.
Yeah.
And what you were saying earlier about like what it does to kids, like mental health and opinion of themselves, I found it goes one of two ways. I know a lot of
Right.
people who internalize, a lot of people who are like, I am like worthless. I am everything that everyone can call me.
Yeah.
But then there's the other type, which I used to think I was in that camp of the other side where you have a problem with authority. Now,
Mm.
I do have a problem with authority, or more accurately, I have a problem with people who demand a higher level of respect because of something arbitrary like a title.
Right.
Nope, you're a person. I will give you the same level of respect as I give a child. And if you are deserving of it, you will gain more respect. If you're an asshole, you'll lose respect.
Yeah.
And I treat my kids as granted, my wife is not fully on board with how I speak with my kids because she's like, you realize you're arguing with a 5-year-old, right? And I'm like, you realize I'm right, though, right? Like, she's wrong. She's 5. I'm right. Um, and
Nice. Yeah.
I can't wait until my kids are teenagers and I'm having full on debates with them.
Yeah.
But I'm always going to treat my kids with a certain level of respect because they've earned that.
Absolutely.
Whereas I know, like my mum and her mum had a very strange relationship. Me and
Hmm.
my mum have a strange relationship, or we used to have a strained relationship in a very different sense because
Right.
I am incapable of keeping my mouth shut. So whenever my mum did anything, I would call her out on it, whereas she never called my gran out on anything, which meant
Right.
that there's a lot of resentment, there was a lot of like issues for the relationship. And I was like, if you just once turned around to Nana and called her a bitch, I'm pretty sure it probably would have solved a lot of issues for you. I am not recommending that everyone goes out and calls their like mother a bitch,
Yeah.
but I have this other sorry, a lot of my life is all done in like mantras and methodologies and all this sort of stuff. And
Okay.
another one of my main ones is very few people on this earth intentionally act like a dick. But if
Yeah.
you are aware that someone's acting like a dick and you tell them, then they have the opportunity to stop being a dick. You're
Right.
really going to put on the whole like expletives galore on this one, but
Yeah.
it's
No problem.
the yeah. So, but if you see someone acting like a dick and you
Yeah.
ignore it, then the responsibility is shifted. It's no longer them. It is now you. You're now
Yeah.
the dick for allowing them to continue to act like that. You give them the
Yeah.
opportunity to change. If they continue to act in the way that they are, then they're the dick. But
Yeah.
if you don't give them that opportunity to change, then it's all with you. 100%,
Yeah.
in my opinion,
I
anyway.
see what you're saying. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That's very true. If you don't do anything about it and they continue going on and you had an opportunity and you do nothing, you're you share a lot of the blame for not trying to stop it. Like, yeah.
Like you could think of it in not to polarize it at all, but you could think of it in the terms of Donald Trump.
Yes.
Imagine more people went, "Do you know you're being a dick?" And he'd be like, "But I'm right." I'm like, "Nope. you look like an Oompa Loompa and you're being a dick, still being a dick. And it was people he knew and trusted. Maybe it
Yeah.
would have worked out differently. Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe he would have carried on the way he was. But then it wouldn't. It would have been on him rather than. I think a lot of it is around the people that you surround yourself with. Like,
Yeah. Well, he's a he hasn't obviously been diagnosed with it, but
mm,
everybody says he's a narcissist.
mm,
And if the people that he has around him aren't doing what he wants or aren't agreeing with what he says, he's going to get rid of them because he wants people who are going to, grovel at his feet and say, "Oh, you're the greatest, you're the best." And as soon as someone goes, "I don't agree with you," he either gets crazy and enraged or he fires you and lets you go. And I don't know if you heard the news yesterday about him attacking the Secret Service agent in the vehicle because he wouldn't do
no,
what he wanted. He wanted to go to the Capitol building and attend his rally, and the driver would not go, and he told him no, and he went back to the White House and he tried to grab the steering wheel, and then he put his hand against
Jesus.
another one's throat. So he physically assaulted him because he wouldn't do what he wanted.
Like, and that thing that plays into the narcissist side, and it plays into that at his core, he is a dick.
Yeah.
So, but that's the thing though. If, like I say, it is not a foolproof thing. It isn't going to say that
Right.
there's going to be no one else in the world that's ever going to be a dick if you call it. No, but like I've said to my mum before, like you need to tell me. Like I've told my mum this whole methodology, and I've said to her, you need to tell me. And she takes extreme pleasure from going, Ross, being a dick. And I'll be like, right, fair enough. Yep. And then I'll
Right.
change how I'm acting. Whereas if she didn't, I would start getting more frustrated, which means my voice would raise. She would start getting more frustrated, which means she'd raise her voice.
Yeah.
And nothing would work. It
Yeah.
would
There's no
just be
winners.
no,
Yeah. Nobody wins because you're now both getting angry at each other and raising your voices, and it's just you're going nowhere. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas calling someone on it, I feel is much harder to do,
Yeah.
but
Totally.
provides much more benefit to it.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. That totally makes sense. Wow. Okay. Well, that's cool. I kind of like the way this has turned. This is awesome. Okay.
I'm going to come
Wow.
on. Sorry, someone who agrees with me. Yep, you can be my yes man. It's fine.
Yeah, there you go. That's nice. Wow. Okay. So yeah. So anything else now I do want to try to get back on topic a little bit just
yeah,
so that
yeah.
we don't get too far here, but um, this support setup, like if it would to go into to practice, right? Like
Yep.
if they said, okay, we're gonna give this a try, we're gonna use a couple schools or a city or something, um, how how effective do you think it would be at the beginning? Because I know that it's not something you can just say, here you go, and then it's going to be like an amazing turn of events. Like, do you think it would be there'd be a lot of work just at the beginning before you would even implement it in order to make it like be effective and useful?
I think it would be very hard to start with. And I think the actual take up of people, right? There's these apps where you can fill out like 45 questions and it tells you like how ADHD you are or like things like that. And like for some people like
Yeah.
me, it's like you're super ADHD and you're not at all autistic. And then you'll get some people it's like, yeah, you're kind of ADHD, you're kind of dyslexic, you're kind of dyspraxic, you're kind of dyscalculic. Like you're a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Uh, what see designing an app like that or an app like that partnering up with like a government body and
Hmm.
then releasing it and sending it to all the parents because now when your kids are at school, you get sent a bunch of apps. It's like, oh, can you go and join Teams? Can you go and join this thing? Can you join that thing? We'll send your homework that way and all this sort of stuff. You send one
Totally.
extra thing and say, this is a way for us to support your child more. Can you have them fill out this small survey so that we can see what additional support they may require whilst they're in high school? Now, to start with,
Yeah.
you're going to be like, my kid needs nothing. And then you're going to have the other ones who are like, my kid needs all the support. And it's going to be like, you're going to have polar opposites. You're going to have the ones who are like, my kid needs everything. And actually, the kid needs nothing.
Yeah.
And then you'll have the ones who's like, my kid needs nothing. It's like, dude, your kid's been smoking out the back of the bike sheds like for the last 3 months and hasn't attended any of his classes. I think you may need a little bit of support. Like, it's
Yeah.
different ends of the spectrum. But I reckon what would happen is you would, after the first year, you would see, because schools work on grades and everything, you would see the natural grades increase. Not necessarily a lot, but it would increase.
Yeah.
You would have
Yeah,
kids who have siblings where, say, the eldest is too old for it, the middle one got out at the right time, and the parents were always like, the middle one's going to be exactly like the big brother who went in and like we've called into school and da 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 because we had this all the way through primary school and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And then actually, no, they're proven wrong. Your kid being allowed a fidget toy in class is actually massively increased. There, like that's a bit of an exaggeration, but your kid being treated slightly differently has actually massively helped their ability to learn and actually digest the information that they're being given. So now your youngest kids, where you were like, I don't really know about this whole quiz thing. Your youngest kids, you're like, you're taking that quiz, right? Because you're going to need the exact same support. And then you'll have people pushing to have their older children do the same thing.
Yeah.
And then you have this also lovely phenomenon that I love where I have people in my work who I'm a part of like a role model thing for the disabled network for specifically for people with ADHD. So I have people who message me and be like, "Oh, can I ask you some questions? Like the kid might have it."
Right.
And then you start talking to them and you go, "So I don't think just my kid has it. I think I might have it too." And then
Yeah.
you're going to have adults and kids, and then you know this nonsense statistic where it's like 2 out of 10 children have ADHD and 1 in 20 adults have it. It doesn't disappear. Yeah. It doesn't go anywhere. They just got better at hiding it, much to their own detriment, probably.
Yeah,
that
sure.
statistic would be like, so it turns out we were mistreating 30% of the population. 30% of our population actually have ADHD, and we've been telling them to just shut up for the last 100 years. Oops.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be more and more diagnosis coming out when the awareness of it is increased, because that's another part as well. Like it, and I was just thinking of this as you were discussing the the results and the time frame, like what it would take to get it in. At the very least, if there's anything they could do, is increase awareness through the school, like parents. I know today more and more parents will hopefully be better aware of these things, like the possibility of ADHD, the possibility that their kid might be dyslexic or some other issue is getting in their way of having a proper education. Even if the school was to send home with their students at the beginning of the year a pamphlet or a little book to so that they can read and at their discretion, right? Like it's not like they're saying please fill it out and send it back. It's something that would be helpful to show the parents, hey, look, we're concerned. We want to make sure that all the children or all the students are getting an opportunity, that they're getting support, and here you go. You can take a look at it and see what you think. Something, at the very least, like, yeah, you're right. It might take a lot of effort and a lot of support from the government or through education to put something like this into play. And it might it might take a few years for it to catch on, where not necessarily accepted, but it's something that more and more people are going to want to do, or they see the benefits of it. Like you said, like the grades increase, and they go, "Wow, look, like this is actually working."
Yeah, I did a quiz work with my team where they all know I have ADHD, and it was
Yeah,
for ADHD Awareness Month, and I did a quiz, and then I had like a myth bust and like presentation afterwards. And in
yeah,
the quiz, it was things like, how do you get ADHD?
mm,
And now the team's like 30, 40 people or something. And they know I can see the results. Granted, I couldn't see who put the results, but I had a couple of duff answers in there. So I had, it was hereditary. It can be caused due to like a brain trauma. It can
yeah,
be caused due to blue food dye. It can be caused due to bad parents.
yeah.
And I had people knowing full well that I have to tick the boxes to say it was food coloring and bad parenting. And I was like, really? You seriously? Okay, right. This is
Okay.
interesting.
Well, I actually want to. There is something that I'd like you to take into account here. I don't know if you're aware of this. There is some research that is actually backing up the bad parenting one. They have said that there are people out there that are developing ADHD due to childhood trauma from
Yeah.
neglect and abuse.
Yep.
So it is a thing. I'm not saying that that's the majority. Like that's we know that the majority of cases from ADHD are genetic. You can get it from your like a parent. If one of your parents has it, there is a good chance like it increases that you could have it. But there is that percentage out there, and it's the research is still pretty new, but there's a lot of evidence out there that's showing that trauma can
I,
create ADHD because the similarities in how the brain develops due to
yeah.
the trauma is very similar to an ADHD genetic developed type brain
I would
too.
be I'd be interested to find out in those studies how
Yeah,
many of those parents who caused the childhood trauma also had ADHD,
right. Yeah, that's a good question.
which
I would like to look into that more.
that'd be much harder to determine because
Yeah.
one, you'd have to tell a parent, so you give your kid childhood trauma. Can we test you for ADHD? Just, I don't think that one's going to fly.
Yeah, I
Uh,
can't see me saying, yeah, sure, why not?
yeah, I used to
Yeah.
hit my kid all the time. Can you tell me why? No, no one's going to do that. They're still just going to be like, yeah, because he was annoying. And my dad hit me because I was annoying. Right. You see what's happening, right? But
Yeah.
it would be interesting.
Absolutely.
But it's
It would be neat to see that, yeah.
but it was just even just putting out that little bit of myth busting, like saying, yes, a good diet can help your symptoms. But if you keep
Yeah.
forgetting to eating, a good diet don't mean shit.
Absolutely.
Like I've ate lunch today. I haven't had breakfast. It is 10 p.m. I haven't had dinner. Um, and my lunch was a KFC. Now, grind, it's chicken. It's full of protein and
Yeah.
fat. Yay, flavor. But that doesn't. That's because me trying to make 3 healthy meals in a day is impossible.
Yeah. It's very hard. Yes, absolutely.
Like
I
for me
I'm
personally,
my I'm the same. Yeah. I
I've never been able to do it.
yeah. I have a hard time. I have a routine in the morning, like I have multiple things that I have to get done. And taking medication is one of them, and having a coffee and making breakfast and feeding the dog, and wanting to
Mhm.
get all these things done before work starts, because when work starts you could potentially be really busy, and then you forget about it.
Yeah,
So yeah, it is a difficult thing to maintain. Absolutely.
and it's people don't. I can understand people's like why people are like this. I can do
Yeah.
it. Why can't you? I get that mindset 100% because
Yeah.
I can go right. Well, any process you can think of, I can think of a better way to do it. Why can't you?
Mm. Yeah.
Oh no, wait, that makes me arrogant. That doesn't make me smarter. And
Right.
it's not that I claim to be smarter than people. I claim to not. If you give me a task that's really, really boring, I need to try
Yeah.
and find some way to make it easier. Not necessarily
Mm.
more exciting because I work in a bank. It isn't the most exciting job in the world, but easier. I'm going to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I
Makes it
can do
makes
that, but I
sense. Yeah.
can't remember to have toast. Like it's so bizarre. Like people going, "Oh, why don't you try lists?" And it's like, "Okay, list item number one, beat you with my list." There we go. That's it. I can manage that. How's that?
Yeah.
I,
I know. I know. It's easy to say it and have someone suggest it, and you can start, but keeping it going and actually doing it is can be a whole different event on its own. I know.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Like remembering, you get you're doing something and it's completely it's something you're working on. It's important or whatever, and someone tells you, "Oh, remember." You should set a reminder to do this, or you should write this down saying, you should do this later. If you're in the middle of that important thing, it can be difficult to go and stop yourself and make that reminder or that note.
Yeah,
It's easier said than done at times.
1,000%. And
Yeah.
that's like I'm my timekeeping's generally quite good.
Right.
Uh, but my parents are convinced it's not
Mm.
because when I was younger, it wasn't.
Yeah.
But now my days dictated by a diary. So I'm like, well, I have no choice. I have to like be at work at this time because I have a meeting at that time. Oh, I have to be
Yeah.
back from lunch at this time because I have a meeting at that time. It's just now it's became a natural thing from being in the environment that I've been in for the last 13 years. But it's taken me 13 years to
Yeah.
turn up to stuff on time.
Right. I know. I had a heck of a time when I was in my early mid 20s and getting into, similar to what I do now, and I had a difficult experience remembering things,
Mm-hmm.
like making sure I had all that I need to get to go and do my day. And I don't remember how many times I had to turn around in my car and go grab something that I forgot. And then I ended up being late because I'm like, well, I was halfway down the road and all of a sudden I realized I don't have my security badge. I can't exactly get in the building without my security badge. So I kind of have to turn around and go get it. And it forced myself painfully because it wasn't like the next day all of a sudden I never forget again, but it forced me to come up with ways of making sure that I didn't forget. And now it's a rare event. It might happen the odd time.
And it almost becomes a compulsion.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, I have to do
because you
this so that
know,
I don't do that.
yeah, you get to the point where it's so strong in your mind that you have to have these things in order to do it right or to do your life properly. And it was a painstaking procedure to get there, but
Hmm.
you're there.
I always find it quite interesting. My car, I call my memory box
Yeah,
because I'll get into my car and because that's where I'm sort of decompressing, I'll be like,
right.
I need to remember and do this. I need to remember and do that. But I'm driving. There is no way, and I'm Scottish, so voice recognition does not pick up what I'm trying to say. So I can't. get my voice to write a list for me. Um,
Right.
and I'll be like, oh, I need to remember and call that person. I need to remember and do this. I need to remember and do that tomorrow. And then the next day, I'll go into my car and on the way into work, I'll be like, I remember I have to do this. I remember I have to do that. I remember I have to do that. I'll then go to work. And then at the end of my day, I'll jump back in my car and go, bugger, I went and forgot all. I was meant to do
Ugh.
this, this, and this. And
Yeah.
it happens all the time. But see what you're saying about security passes, that's funny to me because I now know all the security guards in my building because of the amount of times I haven't brought my pass and I get a temporary one. Like the protocol is they have to email your manager to like verify you. They don't do that anymore. They're just like, hi Ross, yep, here's your pass.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I understand that. I totally get that. It's
Now,
tough, but it's a lot of work, and I there are some people out there in the world that don't really understand. I guess
yeah,
there's a lot of they're so used to people being a certain way that when someone who is an ADHD, whether it's hyperactive or just an inattentive like me, they're they're different. They're not exactly gonna remember the same way. They're not gonna have the same methods or remembering style. Like yeah, and it's hard to get used to. And some people out there aren't very accepting or open minded to it.
yeah. And I think there's a big issue with people who they actually it's sort of remember like the old school thing like American Beauty like type movie plot where it is
Yeah.
the homophobe was gay. I think there's a big part of that where people are like, well, no one ever gave me that chance. No one ever let me, I was like that as a kid. No one ever said that I could like swing in a chair. No one ever said that I could tap my finger. I used to get my fingers hit with a ruler when I did that in class. So why should you
Wow.
be able to? Because you didn't have this opportunity, would you not have rather have this opportunity? Instead of being pissed that someone else is now getting that, because you didn't, why not just be happy that someone is? It just
Yeah.
makes no sense to me. But do you want to talk about before we were recording? When
Yeah.
I brought up the topic, first of all, you mentioned about the psychology
Yeah.
idea. Do you want to explain that a bit? Because we had a quite good conversation before we started recording about the
Oh.
psychology.
Um. Yeah. I was saying, and there's some people who discuss or brought up the idea of making a psychology class in school part of the curriculum, where you have a semester once a year in your during high school where you take a psychology class and you learn about like mental illness and different psychological aspects of life and like
Sort of the way like sex ed is done. Like
yeah,
you don't do
exactly.
sex ed the whole way through school. You do it for like a term, yeah.
Yeah, like I may be my idea might be, or the idea might be a bit extreme. Maybe once every year for 3 years might be a bit much, possibly. But it at least doing one semester in a grade that you choose at least, where you learn about psychology, like a whole bunch of different aspects, right? Like you could have guest speakers where a psychiatrist comes in, or a psychologist, or a mental expert, or a neurologist, like multiple different kinds of angles you could
Hmm.
teach teenagers who are about to go into real life, teach them about psychology and the mind, and really have a better understanding of how the mind works, and because a lot of it is all like when they get out of school, they're taught how to do things a certain way and think a certain way, and whenever the psychological aspect comes around, they don't really understand it, or they don't really know much about it, so they're kind of lacking in that area. And it would be important because the possibility of a better understanding and a better acceptance of things like mental health and the psychology aspect of how the world works could really benefit so
Yeah,
many people out
100%,
there.
yeah. And that's the thing. It could be it would create. It's like why uh, you have. Is it? It's in the States that you have it. Is it race theory? Is that?
Sorry.
Is it race theory? It's something about basically talking about like
Hmm.
other cultures and races and things that were done and
Oh,
all that sort
race
of stuff.
theory. I see. Yes, yes.
Yeah, like it's like that.
Yeah.
It's to give you their perspective so that you have a bit more of an understanding and openness towards it rather than I don't know and I don't want to know.
Right.
Doing this
Yeah,
would be very similar, I think.
I think a lot of companies today do like a kind of like a course or a session where it's unconscious bias, where yeah, and where they try to show employees and coworkers the signs of them showing bias towards different races and cultures without knowing that they're doing it, right? Like,
I have a friend
yeah.
that did it, and the only thing that came out was apparently he had an unconscious bias to people who were ginger,
Ah,
uh, and he leaned into it. So, like, because it's over here, the running joke is they're the last people you can make fun of, um,
right.
and he will say to people who he knows and who he knows are okay with it, like jokes about them being ginger. And like, it's not my fault. I have an unconscious bias against people who are ginger. Now, I don't know if this is based in fact, because I find it very hard to believe that an unconscious bias thing would pull out hair color, but it's still funny to think that he went, nope, I have an unconscious bias towards people who are ginger. So now I'm just going to lean into it because it's okay to still like take the piss out of them.
Interesting.
It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
I haven't I haven't done that. I don't know if it's not as big up here in Canada as it is in the United States. They've been really trying to push it down there because there's been a lot of racial issues and even
A little bit.
gender issues. Yeah. And up here, I think like the Starbucks companies were doing that, but I
Hmm.
haven't heard a ton about it up here, and like so I don't
Yeah,
know
sorry,
exactly where it's
that's
going.
my ignorance. I think I've kept on referring to you as if you were in the States. I know you're in Canada. You told me you were in Canada, and yet
It's
it's
okay.
like when people call me English.
Well, yeah, I like to keep an open mind about everything in regards to like psychological and mental things. I really try to keep political stuff out because it's a very tough and very tense thing today.
Very
So,
polarizing to have an opinion on
yeah,
it too. Yeah, I the way I struggle with this a little bit because I recently learned about. Well, I say recently, it was like 2 years ago. I learned about the tolerance paradox. Have you
right.
heard of this? Where
Maybe I'm not sure.
if you're tolerant of everyone, then you're also tolerant of the people who disagree quite radically with your thoughts,
Right.
which you don't want to be tolerant. Whereas the way I kind of think of it is you can think about whatever you want. You have freedom of thought. People confuse freedom of thought with freedom of speech. You
Yeah.
can have freedom of thought without consequence. Freedom of speech has consequence.
Yeah,
You
for
are not
sure.
in control of what thoughts you have. Your environment, your culture, your upbringing, that puts unconscious bias into you.
Yeah.
But so long as you go, like if you were to think something shitty and go, oh, where did that come from? Yep, nope, I've updated that. I don't feel like that anymore. But as an automatic response to how you were as a child, like for
Yeah.
example, like when I was younger and everything was gay, doesn't matter what you did, everything was gay. Whereas now, there might be something that'll kick in, and I'll be like, and whoa, wait a minute, what? No, that's not how we think anymore. That's
Yeah.
not. But if someone was to act on those thoughts, that's when. I would no longer be tolerant of it.
Right.
But someone can have different political beliefs, religious beliefs, anything like that. I don't care. You can have all those, but just don't try and make other people have them. Like,
Yeah.
let other people.
Yeah.
Like, I have a very strong thing about religion as well, because my family, or my mom anyway, is Protestant,
Yeah.
and I went to a Catholic school. Now,
Okay.
I'm agnostic, but as a Protestant child in a Catholic school, I wasn't allowed to get involved in anything. So we'd go to
Oh.
church every Friday, and I was told to sit at the back of the church, and I wasn't allowed to be involved in anything,
Huh.
which gives you a very unique perspective on religion. And
Yeah.
it's very much, you can believe whatever you want to believe, but I don't have to believe in the same thing as you. And that doesn't make me a bad person. It makes me a bad person if my beliefs believe that certain people should be tortured,
Mm-hmm.
but you like it. You get very philosophical and political when you get into this sort of territory, and we're way like off the point now. But
Yeah.
I can sort of bring it back round when we're talking about you, people. Like when I told someone I got diagnosed with ADHD, their
Yeah.
reply to me was, "Oh, my daughter almost had that. A doctor said that if he could, he would have diagnosed her on the spot, but we didn't go back to that doctor, so she doesn't have ADHD." And I was like, "No, she does. You're just a terrible parent."
Yeah.
And that totally changed my perspective on it, because I was all about mental health, being loud and proud about it. And it's like, if you have a question, ask me the question. And then that hit me, and I was like, oh, what? Well, that's wrong. Like, what? How can you be so wrong? Like, but there are still those people who think like that, who think it's not ADHD. That's just a made up thing that says your
Yeah.
parents didn't know how to punish you.
Yeah. That was very common, especially in the 80s and 90s, which was my time. And yeah, there's probably a lot, there were probably a lot of adults today that are getting diagnosed now that could have easily have been diagnosed back then.
Yeah.
And just it makes you think the things that could have been different if they had. But that's a lot of hearsay, because who knows, right? Like, who's to say
It's
what would have happened?
it's when you get people who come out with stuff like, oh, this new ADHD thing that everyone seems to have. It's like, it's not new. It's really old, actually.
Yeah.
Uh, the theory goes back to the point where, when we were back in the like Stone Age, and we were the guys who made sure you didn't die, because we were able to notice the leaf rustling a little bit.
Yeah.
You didn't. We did.
Yeah,
We're those
exactly.
ones. We're just not designed for this day and age. But you say that, we're also probably the most innovators of this day and age. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, there we go. That's a good way to end. All right. I'd like to thank Ross for being on the show. This was a very wide ranged of topic kind of setting, but it was actually really good. We got a lot discussed, and it was a really good topic to start on. Absolutely. So that's it for this episode. Thank you, Ross, for being on my show. I really do appreciate it, and I had a lot of fun talking about this.
No, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this was an informative episode, and I hope you had a good laugh or two as well. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.